The line stretched so far down Main Street that people stopped their cars just to stare. 200 soldiers in perfect formation, their boots shining in the morning sun, all waiting outside Rosie's diner. They stood silent as statues, eyes forward, not moving an inch. The sight was so strange, so impossible, that the whole town came to a complete stop. Inside the diner, behind the cracked window, a young woman named Grace pressed her face against the glass. Her hands shook as she gripped the edge of the counter. 24 hours ago, she was just another broke waitress trying to make ends meet. Now, an entire military unit was lined up outside her workplace and she had no idea why. "Grace, you better get out here and explain what's going on," called her boss, Mr. Peterson, from behind the kitchen door. His voice carried the kind of anger that usually meant someone was about to lose their job. But Grace couldn't move. She couldn't think. All she could remember was yesterday, the young man in the expensive suit who couldn't pay his bill, her stupid decision to help him, and the way he looked at her when she handed over her last $20. She thought she'd never see him again. She thought it was just another bad choice in a life full of them. The soldiers didn't move. They didn't speak. They just waited. Grace had grown up in this small town where nothing exciting ever happened. Her mother cleaned houses for rich families, and her father left when she was 10. She learned early that life wasn't fair, especially if you were poor and black in a place where most people looked the other way when you needed help. She'd been working at Rosie's diner for 3 years, saving every penny she could. The pay was terrible, the customers were often rude, and her feet hurt every night from standing for 12 hours straight. But it was honest work and she was proud of that. Yesterday started like any other day. She woke up in her tiny apartment above the old barber shop, ate a piece of toast for breakfast because that's all she had, and walked the 6 blocks to work. The morning rush was busy but nothing special. Coffee for the construction workers, pancakes for the high school kids, the usual complaints about the weather. Then he walked in. Grace noticed him right away because he looked so out of place. His suit probably cost more than she made in 6 months. His shoes were the kind you see in magazines. Even his haircut looked expensive. He sat in the corner booth, ordered coffee and pie, and spent 2 hours making phone calls in a language she didn't recognize. When he finished eating, he reached for his wallet and his face went white. He checked every pocket twice, then looked up at her with panic in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, and his accent was definitely not from around here. "I think someone stole my wallet. I have no money to pay." Grace should have called Mr. Peterson. That's what the rules said to do. But something about the way the young man looked, embarrassed and scared and far from home, reminded her of herself. "How much do you need?" she asked. $20. Grace had exactly $23 in her purse. It was supposed to last her until payday, which was still 4 days away. She looked at this stranger, this rich-looking man who somehow had no money, and made a choice that would change everything. She paid his bill. "Thank you," he said, standing up. "I will not forget this kindness." "Don't worry about it," Grace replied, though inside she was already worrying about how she'd buy groceries. He wrote something on a napkin and handed it to her. "My name is David. If you ever need anything at all, you call this number." Grace looked at the napkin. The handwriting was neat, but the numbers meant nothing to her. She stuffed it in her apron pocket and forgot about it. The rest of her shift was normal. She served dinner to the usual crowd, cleaned tables and counted her tips. She had made $8.37. Added to her remaining $3, she had enough to buy bread and peanut butter. She'd eaten worse meals. She walked home as the sun was setting, tired but not unhappy. She'd helped someone today. That had to count for something. Now, staring at the impossible sight outside her window, Grace wondered if helping that stranger was the biggest mistake of her life. The soldiers looked serious, official, like they were here on important business. The kind of business that small-town waitresses definitely didn't want to be involved in. "Grace." Mr. Peterson's voice was getting louder. "Get out here now." She took a deep breath and walked to the front door. The moment she stepped outside, something strange happened. Every single soldier turned to look at her. Not their heads. Their whole bodies pivoted in perfect unison, like they were part of some giant machine. The one in front, who had more decorations on his uniform than the others, stepped forward. He was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and kind eyes that didn't match his serious expression. "Are you Grace Williams?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "My name is Colonel Harrison. We need to talk." The diner had never been so quiet. Every customer sat frozen in their seats, coffee cups halfway to their lips, staring at the scene outside. Grace felt like she was in a dream, or maybe a nightmare. Colonel Harrison gestured toward the empty parking lot behind the diner. Can we speak privately? Grace nodded, though her legs felt like jelly. She followed him away from the crowd, very aware that 199 other soldiers were watching every step she took. Miss Williams, the colonel began, yesterday you helped a young man who couldn't pay his restaurant bill. Yes, sir. But I don't understand. That young man was David Petrov, son of King Alexander Petrov of Valdonia. Grace blinked. King? Like an actual king? An actual king. Valdonia is a small country in Eastern Europe. Prince David was traveling in the United States on diplomatic business when his security team lost track of him in Atlanta. He ended up here alone after his credit cards were stolen. Grace's mind was spinning. I've never heard of Valdonia. Most Americans haven't. It's about the size of Delaware, but it's very wealthy because of oil and technology companies. More importantly, King Alexander has strong ties to the American military. We've been allies for 20 years. Okay, but why are you here? I just paid for his pie. It wasn't a big deal. Colonel Harrison smiled for the first time. Miss Williams, do you have any idea what $20 means to a prince? $20? Prince David called his father yesterday evening. He told him about a young woman who gave a stranger her last money without asking for anything in return. King Alexander was so moved that he immediately contacted the Pentagon. Grace felt dizzy. The Pentagon? The king wants to thank you personally. He's flying here tomorrow. A king is coming here? To see me? Not just the king. The royal family, several government ministers, and about 50 security personnel. This is turning into quite an event. Grace looked around at her small town, the cracked sidewalks, the old buildings, the rusted streetlights. But this place isn't fancy enough for a king. Miss Williams, true nobility isn't about fancy places. It's about character. You showed character when you helped his son. The colonel paused and looked back at his soldiers. These men volunteered to come here today. When word spread through the base about what you did, everyone wanted to be part of honoring you. Honoring me? You'll understand tomorrow. For now, I need to ask you some questions for security purposes. Then we'll prepare for the king's arrival. Grace's head was spinning. Yesterday she was worried about buying groceries. Today a king was coming to visit her. None of this made any sense. Colonel, I need to call my mother. She's not going to believe this. Of course. But first, let me explain what's going to happen. For the next hour, Colonel Harrison told Grace about protocols and procedures, about security sweeps and background checks, about how her little town was about to become the center of international attention. The media will be here soon, he warned. Reporters, television crews, photographers. Are you prepared for that? Grace thought about her one good dress, which had a small stain on the front. She thought about her tiny apartment with the leaky ceiling. She thought about her mother, who cleaned other people's houses and never got thanked for it. Colonel, can I ask you something? Of course. Why does this matter so much? I mean, $20 isn't exactly a fortune. Colonel Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Miss Williams, Prince David has traveled all over the world. He's met presidents and prime ministers, celebrities and billionaires. Everyone wants something from him: money, influence, connections, favors. You're the first person who ever gave him something without wanting anything back. But I didn't know who he was. Exactly. That's what makes it special. Grace looked at the soldiers still standing in perfect formation. They'd been there for hours without complaining, without moving, just to honor her small act of kindness. What am I supposed to wear when I meet a king? Colonel Harrison smiled. Just be yourself, Miss Williams. That's all anyone can ask. As the sun began to set, Grace finally went back inside the diner. The customers were still there, still staring, still trying to understand what they'd witnessed. Mr. Peterson, her boss, looked like he'd seen a ghost. Grace, he said, I think you're going to need tomorrow off. For the first time in years, Grace laughed until she cried. Grace barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined meeting a real king and saying something stupid. What if she forgot to bow? What if she used the wrong fork at dinner? What if she embarrassed herself in front of the whole world? By morning, her small town looked completely different. News trucks lined Main Street. Reporters stood in front of cameras talking to people all over the world. The hotel was booked solid for the first time in 20 years. Everyone was here to see the poor waitress who caught a king's attention. Grace's phone had been ringing all night. Her mother called crying happy tears. Her old high school friends called to congratulate her. Even people she barely knew wanted to talk to her. But the strangest call came at 6 in the morning. Grace? This is David. She recognized his voice immediately. David? The prince? Yes. I wanted to apologize for all this craziness. I never meant for it to become such a big deal. It's okay. I think. My father is very excited to meet you. He's been talking about your kindness all week. Grace sat on her bed in her old pajamas, talking to a prince on the phone. If someone had told her this would happen a week ago, she would have laughed. David, can I ask you something? Anything. Why didn't you tell me who you were? There was a long pause. Because people treat me differently when they know. They become nervous or fake or greedy. You treated me like a regular person who needed help. That was the most honest interaction I've had in years. Grace understood that feeling. People in town had always treated her like the poor girl whose father left. Now they were treating her like some kind of celebrity. She missed being normal. Will things go back to normal after your father leaves? I don't think anything will ever be normal again, David said softly. But maybe that's not a bad thing. By 10 o'clock, the town square was packed with people. Mayor Thompson, who usually couldn't organize a simple parade, was running around trying to manage an international event. The fire department had set up barriers. The police were directing traffic. Even the high school band was practicing songs they'd never played before. Grace stood in her apartment, staring at her closet. She owned exactly 3 dresses. One was too small, one had that stain on the front, and one was plain black with no decorations. She chose the black one and hoped for the best. Someone knocked on her door. Grace opened it to find a woman in an expensive suit carrying several bags. Miss Williams? I'm Sarah Chin, sent by the royal family. We're here to help you prepare. Behind Sarah were 2 other women, a hairstylist, and a man carrying what looked like an entire jewelry store. Prepare for what? To meet the king, of course. For the next 2 hours, Grace was pampered like she'd never been in her life. They did her hair, her makeup, and her nails. They brought her a beautiful blue dress that fit perfectly. They gave her shoes that didn't hurt her feet and jewelry that sparkled in the light. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. You look beautiful, Sarah said. But more importantly, you look like yourself. That's what matters. At exactly 1 o'clock, Air Force One landed at the tiny regional airport 20 miles away. Grace watched on television as King Alexander stepped off the plane, waving to the crowds. He was younger than she expected, maybe 45, with kind eyes like his son. Prince David was with him, wearing a navy uniform covered in medals. He looked completely different from the scared young man who couldn't pay for pie. The royal motorcade arrived in town at 2 o'clock. Grace waited in the town square with the mayor, Colonel Harrison, and what felt like half the world's media. Her hands were shaking, but she tried to remember what Sarah had told her. Just be yourself. The king's car stopped right in front of her. A security guard opened the door and King Alexander stepped out. He was smaller than she expected but had a presence that filled the entire square. When he looked at her, she felt like he was seeing straight into her soul. Miss Williams, he said, walking directly to her. Thank you for your kindness to my son. Grace tried to remember if she was supposed to bow or curtsy or do something formal, but the king held out his hand for a simple handshake. Your Majesty, she managed to say. Please call me Alexander. You are our honored guest today. Behind him, Prince David smiled and nodded at her. The scared young man was gone, replaced by someone confident and royal, but his eyes were still kind. Miss Williams, King Alexander continued, I have traveled here to personally thank you. But I also have a proposal. Grace's heart started beating faster. A proposal? I would like to invite you to visit Valdonia as our guest. I want my people to meet the young woman who showed such generosity to a stranger. The crowd around them erupted in cheers and applause. Grace felt overwhelmed by the noise, the cameras, the attention. This was all happening too fast. I don't have a passport, she said, feeling stupid. King Alexander smiled. That can be arranged. The rest of the day passed like a whirlwind. Grace found herself sitting at the head table during a formal dinner in the high school gymnasium, which had been transformed into something that looked almost royal. She ate food she couldn't pronounce while trying to make conversation with kings and princes and people whose names she'd only seen in newspapers. King Alexander was nothing like she expected. He asked about her life, her dreams, her mother. He seemed genuinely interested in her answers, not just being polite. Grace, he said during dessert, David told me you gave him your last $20. Why? He looked like he needed help. I know what it feels like to be far from home with no money. But you didn't know him. He could have been anyone. Grace thought about it. My mother always taught me that kindness doesn't cost anything, but it's worth everything. King Alexander nodded slowly. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She is. She raised me by herself after my father left. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. I would like to meet her. She's working tonight. She cleans offices downtown after hours. The king looked surprised. She's working? Today? She couldn't afford to take time off. Bills don't stop because there's a king in town. King Alexander excused himself and spoke quietly to one of his assistants. Grace wondered if she'd said something wrong. 20 minutes later, her mother walked into the gymnasium. Grace had never seen her look so nervous or so proud. She was wearing her best dress, the one she saved for church, and someone had obviously helped her with her hair and makeup. Mama? Grace jumped up and hugged her. Baby girl, I can't believe all this is happening. King Alexander stood up as they approached. Mrs. Williams, it's an honor to meet you. You raised an exceptional daughter. Grace's mother looked like she might faint. Thank you, Your Majesty. Grace has always been special. Yes, she has. Mrs. Williams, I hope you won't mind, but I've arranged for you to take some time off work. With full pay, of course. Grace's mother started crying. I don't understand. Your daughter is going to visit our country. I was hoping you might come with her. Grace felt like the world was spinning. Both of us. If you'd like. Valdonia is beautiful this time of year, and I think you'd enjoy seeing how much your kindness has inspired our people. Grace looked at her mother, who was still crying. They'd never been on a real vacation, never been anywhere together except the next town over. Mama, do you want to go? Baby, I've never been on an airplane. Prince David, who had been quietly listening, stepped forward. Mrs. Williams, I promise you'll be safe and comfortable. We'll take very good care of both of you. The rest of the evening was spent making plans. Grace and her mother would fly to Valdonia in 1 week. They'd stay in the royal palace as honored guests. They'd meet government officials, tour the country, and attend a formal ceremony where Grace would receive some kind of medal for her kindness. I don't deserve a medal for doing what anyone should do, Grace protested. That's exactly why you deserve it, King Alexander replied. Late that night, after the king and his entourage had returned to their hotel, Grace sat in her apartment with her mother. Everything felt surreal. Mama, are you sure about this? Flying to another country with people we barely know. Grace, honey, I've been cleaning other people's houses for 15 years. I've watched rich folks come and go, and most of them wouldn't give you the time of day if you were on fire. But that young man, that prince, he looked at you like you were precious. And his father, the king, he treated us like we mattered. But what if we embarrass ourselves? Then we embarrass ourselves. But we'll do it together, in a palace, in a foreign country, having the adventure of our lives. Grace smiled. Her mother had always been braver than she was. Besides, her mother continued, you've been taking care of everyone else for so long. Maybe it's time someone took care of you. That night, Grace dreamed about castles and fancy dresses and a young prince who couldn't pay for pie. When she woke up, she found a package outside her door with a note from Prince David. Grace, thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists in the world. I can't wait to show you mine. D. Inside the package was a first-class plane ticket to Valdonia and a small jewelry box. The box contained a simple silver bracelet with one charm, a tiny coffee cup. Grace laughed until she cried, then called her mother to tell her their adventure was about to begin. But as she looked out her window at the reporters still camped outside, she wondered if she was ready for her life to change so completely. What if she liked being rich and famous? What if she forgot who she really was? What if $20 had bought her more than she ever bargained for? The week before their trip passed in a blur of interviews, preparations, and constant attention. Grace's story had spread around the world. She received letters from people in dozens of countries, all telling her about times they'd helped strangers or been helped by them. But she also received some letters that weren't so nice. People who thought she was putting on an act to get rich. People who said terrible things about her race, her background, her family. People who couldn't believe that someone like her deserved royal treatment. Don't read those, her mother advised, taking a particularly nasty letter away from her. Some people can't stand to see others happy. But what if they're right? What if I'm getting too big for my britches? Grace Williams, you paid for a stranger's meal with your last $20. If that's getting too big for your britches, then the world needs more people with big britches. The night before they left, Grace couldn't sleep. She walked through her tiny apartment, touching familiar things. The coffee maker that only worked sometimes, the couch she'd bought at a yard sale, the photos of her and her mother at various church events and high school graduations. Would she ever be happy with this simple life again after living in a palace? Her phone rang at midnight. It was Prince David. Grace? I hope I didn't wake you. I couldn't sleep anyway. Nervous about tomorrow? Terrified. David laughed softly. I was terrified the first time I met you too. You were terrified of me? I'm a waitress from nowhere. You were the first person in years who saw me as just another person who needed help. That was terrifying and wonderful at the same time. Grace sat on her bed holding the phone close. David, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever get tired of being a prince? There was a long pause. Every day. I love my country and my people, but sometimes I wish I could just be David. Not Prince David, not the future king, just David. That's how I feel about all this attention. I just want to be Grace. That's why I'm glad you're coming. In Valdonia, you can be whoever you want to be. Even just Grace? Especially just Grace. The next morning, Grace and her mother rode to the airport in a royal limousine. Grace had never been in a car with a television, a mini refrigerator, and seats softer than her bed. At the airport, they boarded a private jet that was bigger than Grace's entire apartment. There were comfortable chairs, a dining area, and even a bedroom. This is how the other half lives, her mother whispered, running her hand along the soft leather seats. Prince David met them on the plane. He looked relaxed and happy, not like the formal prince from the ceremony. Welcome aboard, he said. Are you ready to see Valdonia? Ready as we'll ever be, Grace replied. The flight took 8 hours. Grace spent most of it looking out the window, amazed by how small everything looked from so high up. Her problems, her tiny town, her ordinary life, it all seemed very far away. David spent the flight telling them about his country. Valdonia was small but beautiful, with mountains and forests and cities full of old buildings. The people were hardworking and proud. The economy was strong because of oil discoveries and technology companies. But the best part, David said, is the people. They're going to love you. How do you know? Because word of your kindness has already spread. There are billboards with your picture in the capital city. The newspapers have been writing about you for a week. You're more famous there than most movie stars. Grace felt sick. Billboards? With my picture? You're a hero, Grace. You reminded people that kindness matters more than money or status. When they landed in Valdonia, Grace looked out the airplane window and gasped. Thousands of people were waiting at the airport, holding signs and flowers. They were cheering and waving, all for her. I can't go out there, she said, backing away from the door. Yes, you can, her mother said, taking her hand. We'll do it together. David stepped beside them. Grace, these people have been waiting for hours just to see you. They don't care if you're nervous or if you make mistakes. They care that you showed kindness to a stranger. Grace took a deep breath and walked to the airplane door. The moment she appeared, the crowd erupted in cheers. People were crying and laughing and calling her name. She waved nervously and the cheering got louder. Grace, 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 they chanted. Her mother squeezed her hand. Listen to that, baby. They love you. As they walked down the airplane stairs, Grace realized something important. These people weren't cheering for her because she was rich or famous or special. They were cheering because she'd done something that anyone could do but most people wouldn't. She'd been kind to a stranger. Maybe that really was worth celebrating. The royal palace was more beautiful than anything Grace had ever imagined. It looked like something from a fairy tale, with tall towers, golden decorations, and gardens that seemed to go on forever. Their rooms were bigger than her entire apartment back home, with beds so soft she felt like she was sleeping on clouds. But the most amazing thing was how the royal family treated them, not like visitors or charity cases but like honored family members. King Alexander gave them a personal tour of the palace, showing them rooms where important treaties had been signed, art collections worth millions of dollars, and a library with books that were hundreds of years old. This palace has been home to 12 generations of my family, he explained as they walked through a hall lined with portraits of former kings and queens. But it's never housed anyone more worthy of honor than you two. Grace's mother kept touching her arm to make sure this was really happening. Your Majesty, this is all so beautiful, but I feel like we don't belong here. Mrs. Williams, nobility isn't about bloodlines or titles. It's about character. You raised a daughter who gave her last money to help a stranger. That makes you more noble than most of the people in these portraits. That evening, they attended a formal dinner with government ministers, business leaders, and foreign ambassadors. Grace wore another beautiful dress provided by the royal family and tried not to embarrass herself with the fancy silverware. The conversation was in English out of respect for her and her mother, and Grace was amazed by how intelligent and thoughtful everyone seemed. These weren't just rich people playing politics. They were genuinely trying to make their country better. Miss Williams, said the Prime Minister, a woman about her mother's age, your story has inspired a new program in our schools. We're teaching children about the importance of kindness to strangers. That's wonderful, Grace replied, but I hope you're also teaching them that kindness shouldn't be news. It should just be normal. The table went quiet and Grace worried she'd said something wrong. Then King Alexander started laughing. Exactly right, he said. We shouldn't have to celebrate basic human decency. But until it becomes normal again, we celebrate the people who remind us what normal should look like. After dinner, Prince David offered to show Grace the palace gardens. They walked along paths lined with flowers she'd never seen before, past fountains and statues that were older than America. Grace, can I tell you something? Of course. When I was sitting in that diner, unable to pay my bill, I was having the worst day of my life. What happened? David sat on a marble bench beside a fountain. I'd just come from a meeting in Atlanta where I was trying to arrange aid for refugees. Children who'd lost their parents in a war, families with nothing left. The negotiations fell through. I felt like I'd failed them. Grace sat beside him. That must have been horrible. I was so angry and frustrated that I dismissed my security team and just started driving. I got lost, ran out of gas, and ended up in your town with no money and no way to contact anyone. And then I made you feel even worse by having to accept charity from a waitress. No, David said firmly. You saved me. Not just from being stuck without money but from losing faith in people. You reminded me that kindness still exists, that there are still people who help others without expecting anything in return. David, I need to tell you something too. What? That $20 was all I had until payday. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for 3 days because of it. David stared at her. You gave me everything you had? It seemed like you needed it more than I did. Grace. David's voice was soft. Do you realize what you did? You sacrificed for a complete stranger. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, they wouldn't have. That's the point. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the fountain and looking at stars that seemed brighter than any Grace had ever seen. David, can I ask you something? Anything. After we go home, will we ever see each other again? David was quiet for a long moment. Would you want to? Yes, but I don't know how that would work. You're a prince who's going to be king someday. I'm a waitress from a small town. Grace, the woman who gave her last $20 to help a stranger, isn't just a waitress. She's extraordinary. But I'm not educated like you. I don't know about politics or diplomacy or running countries. You know about kindness and sacrifice and doing the right thing even when it's hard. Those are the most important qualifications for anything. Grace looked at this prince who could have anyone in the world, and wondered if he could possibly be interested in someone like her. Not just as a friend or a symbol of kindness but as a woman. David, are you sure you're not just grateful? Sometimes gratitude can feel like something else. David turned to face her completely. Grace, I've met hundreds of women who wanted to be with me because I'm a prince. You're the first woman I've wanted to be with who doesn't care that I'm a prince. Grace's heart started beating faster. What are you saying? I'm saying that in 3 days, you've become the most important person in my life. Before Grace could respond, they heard footsteps on the garden path. King Alexander appeared, looking apologetic. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Grace, there's someone here to see you. To see me? It's 10 o'clock at night. It's important. Trust me. Grace and David followed the king back to the palace, wondering who could possibly want to see her at this hour in a foreign country. The answer was waiting in the main parlor, and it changed everything. Standing in the parlor was a man Grace hadn't seen in 14 years, her father. He looked older, grayer, but she recognized him immediately. The same eyes, the same stubborn jaw, the same way of standing with his hands in his pockets when he was nervous. Grace, he said softly. Grace felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. What are you doing here? I saw you on the news. I had to come. Grace's mother appeared in the doorway and froze. Robert. Hello, Linda. King Alexander cleared his throat. Perhaps we should give you some privacy. David, let's go to my office. No, Grace said quickly. Stay. Please. She needed them there. She needed witnesses to whatever was about to happen because she didn't trust herself to handle this alone. Grace, her father continued, I know I don't have the right to be here, but when I saw what happened, how famous you've become, I had to try to make things right. Make things right? Grace's voice was getting louder. You left when I was 10 years old. You disappeared without a word. You missed my graduation, my birthdays, every important moment of my life. Now you show up because I'm on television? It's not like that. Then what is it like, Robert? Her mother asked. Her voice was cold in a way Grace had never heard before. I made mistakes. Big mistakes. I was young and scared and I didn't know how to be a father or a husband. So you ran away, Grace said. I thought you'd be better off without me. We were, her mother said simply. Robert flinched like he'd been slapped. Linda, I know I hurt you both. I know I can't undo that. But seeing Grace on the news, seeing what a wonderful woman she's become, I realized I threw away the best thing in my life. Two best things, Grace corrected. You threw away two best things. You're right. Both of you. But I want to make up for it now. Grace laughed, but there was no humor in it. Make up for 14 years? How exactly do you plan to do that? I don't know. But I want to try. I want to be part of your life again. Where were you when I was working 2 jobs to help Mama pay rent? Where were you when I was wearing the same 3 dresses to school because we couldn't afford new clothes? Where were you when I cried myself to sleep wondering why my daddy didn't love me enough to stay? Robert's eyes filled with tears. Grace, I did love you. I loved you both. That's why I left. That doesn't make any sense. I was drinking too much. I was angry all the time. I was turning into my father, and I swore I'd never do that to my family. Grace's mother sat down heavily in a chair. So you decided to abandon your family instead? I thought it was better than destroying you the way my father destroyed us. Robert, her mother said tiredly, your father was mean and violent. You were just weak. The words hung in the air like a judgment. Robert looked like he'd been punched. King Alexander, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward. Mr. Williams, I don't know you and I don't know your story. But I know your daughter. She has spent her adult life taking care of others, working hard and making sacrifices. She gave her last $20 to help a stranger. That kind of character comes from somewhere. He looked at Grace's mother. Mrs. Williams, you raised an exceptional daughter alone. That takes strength and courage most people don't have. Then he looked at Robert. And you, sir, abandoned them when they needed you most. Now you appear because your daughter is famous. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Robert's face turned red. You don't understand the situation. I understand that a real man doesn't run away from his responsibilities, King Alexander said firmly. A real man stays and fights for his family, even when it's hard. Prince David stepped closer to Grace. Grace, you don't have to deal with this now. This is supposed to be your time to be celebrated, not attacked by your past. Grace looked at her father, really looked at him. He seemed smaller than she remembered, desperate in a way that made her feel sorry for him despite her anger. Why now? She asked quietly. Why not 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Why wait until I'm on international television? Robert shifted uncomfortably. I saw how successful you've become, how respected. I thought maybe you'd be ready to forgive me. Successful? Grace almost laughed. Dad, I'm a waitress. I live in a tiny apartment and I was eating peanut butter sandwiches until this week. I'm not successful. I just did something decent for another human being. But you're here in a palace meeting with kings? That's not success. That's just luck and kindness coming back around. Grace's mother stood up. Robert, I think you should leave. Linda, please. I know I don't deserve another chance, but... You're right, Grace interrupted. You don't deserve another chance. But that's not the point. Everyone looked at her. The point is what kind of person I want to be. I can hold on to anger and hurt for the rest of my life, or I can choose to forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because carrying that anger is too heavy. Robert's eyes filled with hope. Grace, does that mean? It means I forgive you for leaving. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean letting you back into our lives like nothing happened. I understand. Do you? Because if you really want to make amends, it's not about what you get from us. It's about what you can give. Mama has been working 3 jobs for 14 years to take care of me. If you want to help her. Pay back some of those child support payments you never made. Send her money every month so she doesn't have to clean other people's houses until she's too old to stand up. Robert nodded eagerly. I can do that. I have a good job now, I can send money. And don't expect us to be grateful. You're not doing us a favor. You're paying a debt that's 14 years overdue. Grace's mother looked at her daughter with something like awe. Grace, honey, you don't have to. Yes, I do, Mama. You sacrificed everything for me. If he wants to be part of making that right, fine. But he doesn't get to waltz back in and play happy family. King Alexander smiled slightly. Miss Williams, you continue to impress me. Grace turned to her father one last time. Dad, I hope you've really changed. I hope you've learned something from all those years of running away. But I need to see it, not just hear it. Actions, not words. Robert nodded, tears streaming down his face. I will. I promise I will. Promises are easy. Follow through is hard. We'll see which one you choose. After Robert left, escorted out by palace security, Grace collapsed into a chair. The emotional weight of the confrontation had drained her completely. Grace, her mother said, sitting beside her, I'm proud of you. Are you? I feel like I was too harsh. You were exactly as harsh as you needed to be. You gave him a chance to make things right, but you didn't let him off the hook for what he did wrong. Prince David knelt beside her chair. Grace, are you okay? I don't know. I thought seeing him again would feel different. I thought I'd be angrier or sadder or something. Mostly I just feel tired. That's normal, King Alexander said gently. Confronting the past is exhausting. But you handled it with more grace and wisdom than most adults twice your age. Did I do the right thing? You did the brave thing, David said. You chose forgiveness over revenge, but you also chose accountability over enabling. That takes incredible strength. Grace looked around at these people who had become so important to her in just a few days. Thank you for being here. I couldn't have handled that alone. You'll never have to handle anything alone again, David said softly. What do you mean? David looked at his father, who nodded encouragingly. Grace, I have something I need to ask you. David took Grace's hands in his, and she felt her heart start racing again. Grace, I know we've only known each other for a few days, but they've been the most important days of my life. David. Let me finish. I've been thinking about what you said in the garden about how we come from different worlds. You're right. But I don't care about that anymore. King Alexander and Grace's mother watched silently, both smiling. Grace Williams, you are the kindest, strongest, most genuine person I have ever met. You make me want to be a better man, a better prince, a better future king. David, what are you saying? David got down on one knee and Grace gasped. I'm saying that I love you. I'm saying that I want to spend the rest of my life learning from your kindness and generosity. I'm saying that Valdonia needs a queen who understands what it means to sacrifice for others. He pulled out a small velvet box. Grace Williams, will you marry me? Grace stared at the ring, a simple, beautiful diamond surrounded by smaller stones that sparkled like stars. It was elegant without being flashy, perfect without being pretentious. David, this is crazy. I know it's fast. I know it seems impossible. But when you know, you know. But I'm just a waitress. I don't know how to be a princess, let alone a queen. You know how to be kind. You know how to work hard. You know how to sacrifice for others. Those are the only qualifications that matter. Grace looked at her mother, who was crying happy tears. Mama, what do you think? Baby, I think that boy loves you for exactly who you are. And I think you love him too. Grace realized her mother was right. Somewhere between the diner and the palace, between helping a stranger and being helped by his family, she had fallen completely in love with Prince David. But what about my life back home? My job, my apartment, my friends? We'll visit whenever you want, David said. And your mother can live here with us or go back and forth, whatever makes her happy. I'd like that, her mother said softly. I'd like to see more of the world than just our little town. Grace looked around the beautiful palace, thought about the kind people she'd met, the opportunities that would be available to her. Then she thought about the scared young man who couldn't pay for pie, and how helping him had led to all of this. David, if I marry you, I want to do more than just be a princess who attends parties and cuts ribbons. What do you want to do? I want to help people. Really help them. I want to work with refugees like the ones you were trying to help in Atlanta. I want to make sure no child goes hungry because their parents can't afford food. I want to use whatever influence I have to make things better for people who need it most. King Alexander stepped forward. Grace, that's exactly the kind of queen Valdonia needs. And you would support that? Even if it means I'm not a traditional princess. Especially because you're not traditional, David said. Grace, you would bring something to the royal family that we've never had, a real understanding of what it means to struggle, to sacrifice, to go without. Grace thought about her tiny apartment, her sore feet from long shifts at the diner, the nights she'd eaten peanut butter sandwiches for dinner. All of that had brought her to this moment. David, are you sure? Really sure? Because once I say yes, I'm going to hold you to everything you just promised. I'm counting on it. Grace took a deep breath. Then yes. Yes, I'll marry you. David slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. He stood up and kissed her, and Grace felt like her whole world had shifted into something beautiful and new. Her mother hugged them both, crying and laughing at the same time. King Alexander shook David's hand and kissed Grace's cheek. "Welcome to the family, Grace. Thank you for accepting me. My dear, you saved my son in more ways than one. We will be forever grateful." The next few hours were a whirlwind of phone calls, plans, and preparations. The engagement would be announced officially in the morning. There would be interviews, photo shoots, and eventually a royal wedding that would be watched by millions of people around the world. But right now, Grace just wanted to sit with David and talk about their future. They walked back out to the gardens where everything had started to change between them. "David, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "That day in the diner when you couldn't pay your bill, were you really broke or was it some kind of test?" David laughed. "I was really broke. My credit cards had been stolen, my phone was dead, and I had no way to contact anyone. I was completely dependent on the kindness of strangers. And I was the stranger who was kind. You were the stranger who was extraordinary." Grace looked at her engagement ring sparkling in the moonlight. "David, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that no matter how fancy our life becomes, we'll never forget what it feels like to need help. Promise me that we'll always remember what $20 means to someone who only has $20. "I promise." "And Grace?" "Yes." "Promise me that you'll never stop being the woman who gave her last money to help a stranger." "I promise." They sealed their promises with a kiss under the stars, two people from completely different worlds who had found something real and lasting in each other. But Grace had no idea that their happiness was about to be tested in ways she never could have imagined. Back in her hometown, news of the engagement was spreading fast. And not everyone was happy about it. The announcement of Grace's engagement to Prince David made headlines around the world. Waitress to Princess, a modern fairy tale, ran on every major news network. Social media exploded with congratulations, criticism, and everything in between. Most of the response was positive. People loved the idea that kindness could be rewarded so dramatically. Grace received thousands of letters from people sharing their own stories of helping strangers or being helped when they needed it most. But there was also a darker response. "She's just a gold digger who got lucky," some people wrote. "She planned the whole thing to trap a rich prince. What kind of prince marries a waitress? He's disgracing his country. She doesn't deserve this. She's nobody special." Grace tried not to read the negative comments, but they were hard to avoid. The worst ones came from people in her own hometown, people who had known her for years but suddenly had strong opinions about her character. "I always knew Grace Williams thought she was better than everyone else," said Mrs. Henderson, her old Sunday school teacher, in an interview with a gossip magazine. "This whole thing doesn't surprise me at all. She was always trying to get attention," claimed a girl Grace barely remembered from high school. "I bet she planned this whole thing." The comments hurt, but what hurt more was that her father kept trying to contact her. He called the palace, sent letters, even gave interviews to reporters claiming that he'd always known Grace was special and that he was proud of her success. "I taught her to be kind to others," Robert Williams told a television reporter. "She gets her generous spirit from me." Grace watched the interview from her room in the palace and felt sick. "He's rewriting history," she told David. "He's making it sound like he was there for me, like he had something to do with who I became." "People will see through that," David assured her. "Your mother has given interviews too. The truth is out there." Grace's mother had indeed spoken to several reporters, telling the real story of raising Grace alone, working multiple jobs, and never hearing from Robert for 14 years. "Grace became the woman she is despite her father, not because of him," her mother had said firmly. "I won't let him take credit for work he didn't do." But the negative attention was taking its toll on Grace. She'd always been a private person, and suddenly every detail of her life was being analyzed by strangers. "Maybe this was a mistake," she said to David one evening as they walked through the palace gardens. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this kind of attention." "Grace, you're stronger than you know. And this negative attention will die down once people get to know the real you." "What if they don't like the real me? Then they're not worth worrying about." But Grace's concerns were about to become much more serious. 3 days before they were scheduled to return to America for a formal engagement announcement, Grace received a phone call that changed everything. "Grace? This is Detective Martinez from the state police." "Detective? Is everything okay? Is my mother all right?" Grace's mother had returned home the day before to handle some business. "Your mother is fine. But we have a situation involving your father." Grace's heart sank. "What kind of situation?" "He's been arrested for fraud." It appears he's been taking money from people, claiming he's collecting donations for a charity in your honor. Grace sat down hard. What? He set up a fake charity called the Grace Williams Foundation for Kindness. He's been going door to door in your hometown and surrounding areas, telling people that you authorized him to collect money for charity work you're planning to do as a princess. How much money? So far, we think he's collected about $50,000. Grace felt like she was going to be sick. $50,000 from people who thought they were helping me do good work? That's right. Many of the victims are elderly people on fixed incomes who gave what they could afford because they believed in your story. Detective, I need you to know that I had nothing to do with this. I didn't authorize any charity. I specifically told my father that if he wanted to make amends, he needed to do it through actions, not words. We believe you, Miss Williams. But this is going to become a media story very quickly. I wanted you to hear it from us first. After Grace hung up, she immediately called David and told him what had happened. Grace, I'm so sorry. David, this is going to destroy everything. People are going to think I was involved or that I knew what he was doing. No, they won't. You've done nothing wrong. But they'll say I should have known better than to trust him. They'll say this proves I'm not fit to be a princess. Grace, listen to me. Your father's actions don't reflect on you any more than your kindness reflects on him. You are not responsible for what he chose to do. But Grace knew that logic wouldn't matter to the media or to people looking for reasons to criticize her. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Princess Debbie's father arrested in charity scam dominated the news cycles. King Alexander called an emergency meeting. Grace, I want you to know that this changes nothing about how we feel about you or about your engagement to David. But Your Majesty, this is going to embarrass your family. People are going to say you made a mistake choosing me. Let them say what they want. We know who you are. But what about the people who gave money thinking they were helping me? They're mostly elderly people who couldn't afford to lose that money. King Alexander and David exchanged looks. What if we made sure they got their money back? David suggested. What if we turn this negative situation into something positive? How? What if we actually started the charity your father pretended to create? What if we used this as an opportunity to begin the humanitarian work you wanted to do? Grace looked at them both. You would do that? Grace, King Alexander said, your father stole money using your name and reputation. The least we can do is make sure those people get their money back and that their donations actually go to help others. But what about the scandal? What about the bad publicity? There will always be scandal and bad publicity when you're in the public eye, David said. What matters is how you respond to it. Do you run away or do you turn it into an opportunity to do good? Grace thought about all the people who had given money because they believed in her story, who had wanted to be part of something good and kind. They deserved better than being victims of her father's greed. Let's do it, she said. Let's start the real Grace Williams Foundation for Kindness. Are you sure? I'm sure. But I want to do it right. I want every penny of those donations to go to people who really need help. I want to turn my father's lie into something true. King Alexander smiled. That, my dear, is exactly the response of a true queen. But even as Grace felt proud of their decision, she couldn't shake the feeling that more challenges were coming. Her father's arrest was just the beginning of a test that would either prove she was strong enough for royal life, or destroy her before she ever got the chance to try. The next morning brought news that made Grace's situation even more complicated. Her father had escaped from police custody during transport to court. He's what? Grace asked Detective Martinez over the phone. He overpowered a guard and ran. We have units searching for him, but so far, no luck. Detective, do you think he might try to contact me? It's possible. We're treating this as a high-priority case because of your connection to the royal family. I've been in touch with palace security. Grace looked out her window at the beautiful gardens that had become so familiar and felt like her past was chasing her into her future. Within an hour, the news of Robert Williams' escape was all over the media. Photos of Grace and David were shown alongside mugshots of her father. Reporters camped outside the palace gates, shouting questions about whether the royal engagement would continue. Grace, David said, finding her in the library where she'd gone to hide from the chaos. We need to talk. Her heart sank. You want to call off the engagement? What? No. Grace, why would you think that? Because this is a disaster. Your father is probably getting advice from his ministers about how associating with me will damage the royal family's reputation. David sat beside her and took her hands. Grace, my father is in meetings right now, but not about calling off our engagement. He's meeting with security experts and public relations specialists about how to protect you and manage this situation. Protect me? Your father has shown that he's willing to use your name and story for criminal purposes. Now he's escaped from custody. We're concerned about what he might do next. Grace hadn't thought about that. She'd been so worried about the embarrassment and scandal that she hadn't considered she might actually be in danger. Do you think he would hurt me? I don't know. But we're not taking any chances. For the next 3 days, Grace felt like a prisoner in the palace. She couldn't go anywhere without security guards. Every phone call was monitored. Every visitor was thoroughly checked. The worst part was watching the news coverage. Opinion was divided about whether Grace was an innocent victim of her father's crimes or somehow complicit in them. She had to know something was wrong, argued one television pundit. You don't just ignore red flags about family members when you're about to marry into royalty. This poor woman is being blamed for her father's actions, countered another. She's already proven her character by her kindness to Prince David. One criminal family member doesn't change that. Grace's mother called every few hours with updates from home. The FBI is involved now, she reported. They're taking this very seriously because of the international implications. Mama, are you safe? I'm fine, baby. They have agents watching me in case your father tries to make contact. But Grace, I need to tell you something. What? Your father called me yesterday. Grace's blood ran cold. What did he say? He said he was sorry about the charity scam, but that he needed money to disappear permanently. He said if I could get him $50,000, he'd never bother us again. Mama, please tell me you didn't. Of course I didn't give him money I don't have. But Grace, he sounded desperate. And desperate people do dangerous things. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about her father, about how his desperation might lead him to do something that would hurt innocent people. At 3 a.m, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. Hello? Grace, it's me. Her father's voice was shaky, tired. Dad, where are you? I can't tell you that. But I needed to call and explain. Explain what? How you stole money from elderly people using my name. I was desperate, Grace. When I saw you on television looking so successful and happy, I thought maybe I could be part of that success. By lying and stealing? I thought if I could raise some money, start a real charity, maybe you'd see that I was trying to change. Dad, that doesn't make any sense. I know. Nothing I've done makes sense. I've spent 14 years making bad decisions, and now I've made the worst one of all. Grace could hear sirens in the background of the call. Dad, you need to turn yourself in. I can't go to prison, Grace. I won't survive it. You should have thought about that before you committed crimes. I know. But Grace, I need you to know something. I'm proud of you. Really proud. You became everything I never could be. Dad. I love you, Grace. I always did. I was just too messed up to show it the right way. The line went dead. 20 minutes later, Detective Martinez called. Miss Williams, we found your father. Is he okay? He's alive, but he's been injured. He crashed his car trying to avoid a roadblock. He's being taken to the hospital under guard. Grace sank into a chair. How badly is he hurt? We don't know yet. But Miss Williams, we found something in his car that you need to know about. What? A detailed plan to kidnap you and demand ransom from the royal family. Grace felt the world spin around her. What? It looks like he was planning to grab you during your trip back to America for the engagement announcement. He had maps, schedules, everything. Grace realized that her father hadn't just been stealing money, he'd been planning to use her as a way to get more money. The man who had abandoned her as a child had been planning to kidnap her as an adult. When David found her an hour later, she was still sitting in the chair, staring at nothing. Grace? Detective Martinez called and told me what happened. Are you all right? My father was going to kidnap me. I know. But he can't hurt you now. David, he was going to kidnap me for money. His own daughter. David knelt beside her chair. Grace, look at me. She met his eyes. Your father's actions say nothing about you and everything about him. You are not responsible for his choices. But what if there's something wrong with me? What if I have whatever made him able to abandon his family and commit crimes? Grace Williams, you gave your last $20 to help a stranger. You forgave your father even after he abandoned you. You chose to turn his charity scam into a real opportunity to help people. You are nothing like him. But, no buts, you are the kindest, most generous person I know. Your father's failures don't change that. Grace started crying, from relief, from exhaustion, from the overwhelming stress of the past week. David, I'm scared that this will never end. That there will always be more scandal, more problems, more reasons for people to say I'm not good enough to be your wife. Then they'll be wrong. But what if you get tired of defending me? David pulled her into his arms. Grace, I fell in love with you because of who you are, not in spite of your circumstances. Your kindness, your strength, your ability to see the good in people even when they don't deserve it, those are the qualities that make you perfect for me and perfect for this life. Even after everything that's happened? Especially after everything that's happened. Grace, you've handled more crisis and scandal in 1 week than most people face in a lifetime, and you've done it with grace and dignity. If that's not queen material, I don't know what is. Grace looked at her engagement ring, still sparkling on her finger despite everything that had happened. David, are you absolutely sure about this? About me? About us. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Then yes. Still yes. Always yes. 3 months later, Grace Williams married Prince David in a ceremony watched by 2 billion people around the world. Her father, serving a 5-year sentence for fraud and attempted kidnapping, watched from prison and cried. The Real Grace Williams Foundation for Kindness had raised over $10 million by the wedding day. Grace used her first official act as princess to announce that the foundation would focus on helping single mothers, providing scholarships for underprivileged children, and supporting refugees, all people who, like her, had faced challenges that weren't their fault. Kindness, she said in her wedding speech, isn't about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It's about choosing to help others even when it's hard, even when it costs you something, even when no one is watching. It's about remembering that we're all just people trying to make it through difficult times, and sometimes the smallest act of generosity can change everything. As she and David drove away from the wedding ceremony in a carriage decorated with flowers, Grace thought about the chain of events that had brought her to this moment. A stranger who couldn't pay for pie. $20 she couldn't afford to give. A choice to be kind when kindness was inconvenient. She'd learned that sometimes the smallest acts of goodness create the biggest changes. And sometimes, when you help others without expecting anything in return, the universe finds ways to help you back. But mostly she'd learned that being kind isn't about the response you get, it's about the person you choose to be. Anne Grace Williams, now Princess Grace of Valdonia, would spend the rest of her life choosing to be kind.